मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग के खिलाफ उठेगी।
So for reactions to the Prime Minister's address at the UNGA, I'm joined at this time by former diplomat G Parthasarathi, with us also former diplomat Vijay Nambiar, and for a perspective from the political spectrum we have Sudheendra Kulkarni and our foreign affairs editor Geeta Mohan. Geeta, can you list out what you think were the Prime Minister's key thrust areas calling for UN reforms, a call that's been articulated many a times in the past but hasn't been acted on by the powers that matter most? We've got 4 countries that support us in the UNSC, 1 that doesn't, and that relationship not being mended at this moment. So where does the proposal for reforming the UNGA really go?
Well, Rahul, to begin with, a very dignified speech, because there was no hitting or lashing out at any country. It was not a very country-specific hitting out or using the platform like many other countries did, including President Trump, to lash out at any one particular country. So, very dignified speech. The India speech, the country statement, speaks of the role that India now plays in not just in the world body but the world stage, and that's a defining space right now for India. Prime Minister Narenda Modi spelled out a few very important things. One, COVID-19, questioned the United Nations response on COVID-19, spoke of India's response to COVID-19 and the help India has given world over, not just in the neighborhood but across the globe, but particularly focusing on the neighborhood. The UN reforms are very important for India. There's a reality that it is not going forward, and India has been raising that issue, like you rightly pointed out, with regards to one country, that is China, that will continue to stop India's move of becoming a permanent member. But the fact that he mentions United Nations Security Council and India becoming a non-permanent member of it come Jan 2021 is a responsibility that India takes very seriously, and he spoke about that. In terms of reforms and the problem of security concerns, he spelled out security concerns, again not lashing out any one country, because no country is important enough at this point in time for India to give that country space. Having said that, in terms of the economic reforms that India has pursued, Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliance, ending discrimination. In fact, he did mention the protection of transgender rights in India, a bill that was passed in 2019, end of 2019. So important aspects that he's really brought out in terms of not just economic but collaborating and putting forth the view of economic and an inclusive economic policy, which includes non-discriminatory measures that have been taken by the Indian government. So a very dignified speech, Rahul, if I may put it that way.
Okay, so let's now go across to some of our guests who are joining us on this broadcast. Ambassador Parthasarathi, Vijay Nambiar and Sudheendra Kulkarni. Let me start with G Parthasarathi and get your sense on, you know, this whole proposal to try and expand the size of the United Nations Security Council. It's been pending for decades now. The Prime Minister making a renewed thrust. We've seen 4 countries come out strongly from the UNSC membership and endorse India's bid. Do you see anything happening at all? What stood out for you, Mr. Parthasarathi, from the Prime Minister's address?
I think my colleague Vijay, who's here from the UN, would be better, well placed. But I think, frankly, I'm quite cynical about this. They are not going to change the world structure, because the others are there. There's Germany, there's Japan, about whom there are objections. There are objections about us, and the present members will see to it that doesn't happen. But what I admire about the Prime Minister's speech was, having said that, he really went on to describe India's contribution to humanity. Now, the whole world is today afflicted by the coronavirus. He focused a great deal of details on things not known across the world. That we are one of the largest producers of farming products. That even requirements of the United States over the last 6 months have been met by us. This is not known. Then going on from there, he has offered his neighbors something which no one has. Even the United States is selling its pharma products to the best bidder. We are giving it to our neighbors to the maximum extent possible. Now, that is really, I think, fits in with this concept of Vasudeva Kutumbakam. It was a dignified presentation of India and ideal on the 75th anniversary because he also did allude to progress we've made on women's rights. And of course, as the previous speaker mentioned, he spoke of self-reliance as being something to spread across countries and through which we demand knowledge. So I think, yes, there was a call for the UN. I think what was more important was that he was appealing to the sentiments of the entire human civilization being afflicted by the coronavirus, and that India, as the largest producer of vaccines in the world, would contribute to it and contribute equitably.
You know, that's an important point you make because there's so much nationalism raging around the vaccine in countries, most of them wanting to secure their own interests and that of their citizens before contributing to the international cause. Vijay Nambiar, you've seen the entire movement to try and change the scope of the United Nations Security Council for years now. Do you think anything in the end will come off? You know, the first time I went to the UN, and this was many years ago, they were still talking about the reform, and even now there's a lot of talk, a lot of demand, but nothing ultimately seems to come out. Does this diminish the relevance of the UN? How important do you think the UN is as the organization looks at the 75th anniversary, given the fact that it's hardly had any role to play in the pandemic, which arguably at this moment is the biggest challenge humanity faces?
I agree with you, Rohit. There's this question of the, I think the Prime Minister's speech, I agree with both Partha and the previous speaker that it takes the high road. And most of all, it actually strongly underlines India's commitment to the UN in terms of its traditional commitment to multilateralism, as well as to the balance and the strengthening of the United Nations. That he makes almost unconditional. And that, I think, is important because despite that, he does say that the deep kind of sense among the people of India that the changes in the world require a basic change in the structure of the United Nations. There have been changes, but there's been the basic structure has not changed, and that is really the structure, the architecture of the Security Council. And he says this in terms, he calls for deeper introspection, and he says that it is not so much a need for the Indian people to find recognition, but it's important for the balance, for the credibility and legitimacy of the United Nations itself. And I think that is important because despite the fact, and I agree with even Partha, that in actual practice, it is this particular question of expansion is going to be subject not only in the P5, of course, among the P5, China will be opposed to it and will continue to express its opposition to the G4. But there are many other countries, both Pakistan as well as other countries like Italy, Korea and others, who have other reasons for opposing an expansion of the permanent membership of the Security Council. And that, I think, will continue to cause difficulty in terms of coming to a final decision. But I think the Prime Minister has made it for the first time that this will affect the credibility of legitimacy. And that's the point you have made, that ultimately there will be...
Sudheendra Kulkarni, the Prime Minister took the high road, India becoming a member of the, non-permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. So we have a 10-year, but unlike a lot of the other countries that were attacking their opponents, including the likes of Imran Khan, the Prime Minister focusing on India's larger vision for the world, for humanity and India's place in the world, rather than getting bogged down in attacking either China or Pakistan?
Today, on the occasion of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly, the Prime Minister truly spoke for the entire nation. On the most important issue on the occasion of the 75th session, he raised the point of restructuring and reform of the United Nations itself. Even though this point has been made by many prime ministers before, it is important the way he said it, that the very credibility of the United Nations is at stake when the largest democracy in the world and also soon to be the most populous nation in the world is denied a place in the decision-making structure. You know, in about a decade's time, India will overtake China in terms of population. What a mockery it would be that the most populous nation in the world has no place in the Security Council. So the legitimacy, the credibility of the United Nations itself is at stake. But I am very hopeful. I don't believe in cynicism on this score. I'm absolutely hopeful that the day is not far when India will be in the decision-making structure, because India's voice is getting stronger. India's stature is becoming higher. We will, in a matter of time, India will be the third largest economy in the world, and there is no way, no country in the world can stop India playing its rightful place, occupying its rightful place in the United Nations structure.
So I want to thank Sudheendra, Kulkarni, G Parthasarathi and Vijay Nambiar for joining us. I think our guest and the Prime Minister making a very important point, which holds the implication that it's a loss to the UN decision-making architecture itself if a country of the nature of India is kept out of the UNSC. So for the relevance going forward of the UNGA over the next 75 years, India has to have an important role at the high table. We're slipping into a break. I'll see you again at 8 p.m. Till then, from all of us here, thank you. See you at 8 p.m.
You are watching